Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. On every episode, Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Dave Campbell. If you're new to the show and like what you hear, take a moment to go out to my website on Substack. The site address is clarityfromchaos.substack.com. There you can listen to the archive shows, see who the upcoming guests are for the month, and support the show, which is really important, by clicking the subscribe button. The advocates of wokeism would have you believe it was all about social justice. Dating back to the early 90s, it began as part of the African American vernacular, but recently gained traction in 2010 as part of the Black Lives Movement and now includes all perceived social injustices, including LGBTQ, etc. But where it really started was the publication of a little pamphlet called The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx in 1848. Together with Frederick Engels, this pamphlet lays out the construct of socialism, a construct that is on display in countries like Russia and China today. As part of this manifesto, Marx advocated the change in our public schools, which can now be seen in our entire educational system, raising generations of would-be socialists. What happened to individualism in our country? A country that used to embrace personal freedom, autonomy, self-reliance, and celebrating unique identities and individual achievements over what is now being termed collective goals. For all of you Gen Zs and millennials out there, an author by the name of Ayn Rand wrote the book The Fountainhead in 1943, which offers the perfect rebuttal to this type of thinking. The book's main characters is architect Howard Rourke, and he offers at the end of the book a perfect summation of individualism at the conclusion, and I'm going to play it for you now.
The defense may proceed.
Your Honor, I shall call no witnesses. This will be my testimony and my summation.
Take the oath.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Thousands of years ago, the first man discovered how to make fire. He was probably burned at the stake he had taught his brothers to light, but he left them a gift they had not conceived, and he lifted darkness off the earth. Throughout the centuries, there were men who took first steps down new roads, armed with nothing but their own vision. The great creators, the thinkers, the artists, the scientists, the inventors, stood alone against the men of their time. Every new thought was opposed, every new invention was denounced. But the men of unborrowed vision went ahead. They fought, they suffered, and they paid, but they won. No creator was prompted by a desire to please his brothers. His brothers hated the gift he offered. His truth was his only motive. His work was his only goal. His work, not those who used it. His creation, not the benefits others derived from it. The creation which gave form to his truth. He held his truth above all things and against all men. He went ahead, whether others agreed with him or not, with his integrity as his only banner. He served nothing and no one. He lived for himself. And only by living for himself was he able to achieve the things which are the glory of mankind. Such is the nature of achievement. Man cannot survive except through his mind. He comes on earth unarmed. His brain is his only weapon. But the mind is an attribute of the individual. There is no such thing as a collective brain. The man who thinks must think and act on his own. The reasoning mind cannot work under any form of compulsion. It cannot be subordinated to the needs, opinions, or wishes of others. It is not an object of sacrifice. The Creator stands on his own judgment. The parasite follows the opinions of others. The Creator thinks. The parasite copies. The Creator produces. The parasite loots. The Creator's concern is the conquest of nature. The parasite's concern is the conquest of man. The Creator requires independence. He neither serves nor rules. He deals with men by free exchange and voluntary choice. The parasite seeks power. He wants to bind all men together in common action and common slavery. He claims that man is only a tool for the use of others, that he must think as they think, act as they act, and live in selfless, joyless servitude to any need but his own. Look at history. Everything we have, every great achievement has come from the independent work of some independent mind. Every horror and destruction came from attempts to force men into a herd of brainless, soulless robots without personal rights, without personal ambition, without will, hope, or dignity. It is an ancient conflict. It has another name: the individual against the collective. Our country, the noblest country in the history of men, was based on the principle of individualism, the principle of man's inalienable rights. It was a country where a man was free to seek his own happiness, to gain and produce, not to give up and renounce, to prosper, not to starve, to achieve, not to plunder, to hold as his highest possession a sense of his personal value, and as his highest virtue, his self-respect. Look at the results. That is what the collectivists are now asking you to destroy, as much of the earth has been destroyed. I am an architect. I know what is to come by the principle on which it is built. We are approaching a world in which I cannot permit myself to live. My ideas are my property. They were taken from me by force, by breach of contract. No appeal was left to me. It was believed that my work belonged to others to do with as they pleased. They had a claim upon me without my consent, that it was my duty to serve them without choice or reward. Now you know why I dynamited Cortland. I designed Cortland. I made it possible. I destroyed it. I agreed to design it for the purpose of seeing it built as I wished. That was the price I set for my work. I was not paid. My building was disfigured at the whim of others who took all the benefits of my work and gave me nothing in return. I came here to say that I do not recognize anyone's right to 1 minute of my life, nor to any part of my energy, nor to any achievement of mine, no matter who makes the claim. It had to be said. The world is perishing from an orgy of self-sacrificing. I came here to be heard in the name of every man of independence still left in the world. I wanted to state my terms. I do not care to work or live on any others. My terms are a man's right to exist for his own sake.
To help us understand the disastrous impact this wokeism has had on our children, I'm extremely pleased to welcome the author of Woke and Weaponized, Mr. Robert Bortons. Robert is the CEO of Classical Conversations, which is a company that supports homeschoolers in over 50 states and over 50 countries. It's the largest homeschooling organization out there, helping to educate over 1 million students since 2013. In addition, Robert's the host of the podcast Refining Rhetoric. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Dave, thanks for having me. And man, it's been a while since I read that book, but it just reminds me why we have gotten to where we are today and why the communists from Russia, with support of the Ford Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation, sought to take over our public schools, our teachers' colleges, because they wanted to get this collectivist ideology into our young people. And we see New York City electing Mayor Mondami
Oh, yeah.
His speech, throwing off the rugged individualism and embrace the warmth of collectivism. And unfortunately, history shows the warmth of collectivism is typically found in gas chambers and in fires and to the death of 100 million plus people, many of them the own citizens of the people implementing this collectivist ideology.
Yep, absolutely. Your book, number one, is marvelous. I've not only read it, but I've given it to several other people, and they've read it, and they're becoming fans as well. But what I found interesting, and I came across this early on, is the 8th grade proctor test that was given in Salina, Kansas in 1895. And I've yet to have college graduates, some of them with masters, one of them a PhD candidate, pass that 8th grade test. And so I think that's pretty telling on the degradation of our educational system in this country. When you have an 8th grade test that is your doorway out of the 8th grade, and we now have PhD candidates that can't even pass this test.
Yeah, and those were students who are taught in a one-room schoolhouse, probably by an 18 or 19-year-old in a mixed age environment, probably 3 months to 4 months a year for 3 or 4 hours a day.
Right.
This was really before the collectivists got a hold of education in our country. 1850 in Massachusetts is when the public schools were founded, and then it spread like a disease to the rest of the states over the next 50 years. And the intent, you can go read Horace Mann. There's a guy named Robert Owen. Their intent was to use the public school system to destroy the family, to destroy private property, and to destroy religion, and replace it with basically atheist humanism and just kind of this woke ideology that everyone needs to be a collectivist, and if we can get rid of private property, that there'll be no more wars, no more starving, all of this sort of ideologies that have been proving wrong time and time again. And so it's taken 150, 175 years to get to where we are today, but every generation has kind of forgot a little bit of what the previous generation knew. Right. And with the help of, like I said, mentioned, organizations like the Ford Foundation in the 80s really spread it up when they were using their grant-making power to do what the Ford Foundation president at the time said was to successfully merge the United States with the USSR. And he didn't mean giving our free market capitalism to the USSR. He meant weaponizing the public school system against our citizens so that they would be ready to become good little Soviets in the future. And of course, we see that in laws being passed in California and New York and these blue states that I think Stalin would be proud of. Yeah, unfortunately, I believe with all my heart you're absolutely correct, Robert, that it's gone past just different ideologies in my mind. It is now just pure evil and the malice that these people have. And I equate this whole thing because to me, it kind of started at the turn of the 20th century. And as we moved into the 20th century, but it's like boiling a frog, and people don't understand the terms, boiling a frog, but that's exactly what's been going on. They've been turning it up 1 degree a year, and pretty soon, and I'm fearful that we're getting real close to the point where the frog's going to be done. He's not going to be out of the pot. He's going to be cooked. So, that's why I believe these conversations are extremely important. Yeah, I mean, the education of our young people is going to make it so how they vote and how they think. And so exactly. Many of the big corporations that write public school curriculum, they were influenced by Soviet spies and things of that nature in the 80s. So they started writing curriculum to, bend society towards their collectivist worldview, especially with Barack Obama's election in, the 8th and 12. He really accelerated that adoption of that woke ideology into our public schools, but it was already there. It just started being more public.
Right.
And like my wife was a school teacher for 10 years before we got married. And when we got married and she started homeschooling our kids, she realized that she had never been taught how to pass on knowledge to the next generation, that everything that she had learned in 4 years, making straight A's, was basically how to, do classroom management and to make, conditioning systems for these kids so that they would, not think on themselves. They would blindly accept authority. And for those who want, the industrialists who wanted our public school system like this, they wanted obedient workers who were just, literate enough to follow directions, but not literate enough to, start their own businesses or to be explorers. And they, intentionally didn't want people to be good at math, that they wanted people to be math illiterate as well, so that they could just be on a consumer hamster wheel, continuing to enrich the oligarchs. How do we get $40 trillion in debt as a country? Well, we have a bunch of collectivist, ideology throughout our government. We don't have rugged individualism anymore. And so I really do believe that we are very close to the end. I mean, very few republics have made it past 250 years. I don't know if the train is completely off the track now. I was optimistic that
We'll
see.
Not sure. I'm not sure either, Robert. That's why I was saying earlier that I think the boiling of the frog is rapidly approaching that finite point. Let's take a step back, though. You mentioned it already, and that was the original origin of the public school system in this country, and how it where it took root, and how it was fed, and then how it was fed out from that point.
Yeah. So most people, or many people, have heard that we've received our education system from Prussia, because our successful education system, nobody knows where that is. But that was Germany pre-World War I. So the education system that allowed a weaponization of a entire nation to start a world war is what we implemented after, here in the United States. And so they got their ideas from a guy named Robert Owen, who was a Welsh industrialist. He had a failed commune, and he basically blamed the fact that children were being raised in their own families' houses, and that if we were to get rid of private property, religion, and family, which he called the Trinity of Evil, that we could only do so by separating children from their parents at the youngest age possible. And the Prussian king basically heard about this letter and these ideas and implemented them there. And then Horace Mann went to Prussia and Russia and Germany in that area and brought it back here to the United States in the 1850s. And then from there, we have guys like John Dewey, who basically said that parents should be viewed as giving us hostages to our cause. And what cause was that? Was this cause of collectivism, that that they wanted to transform America from a patriotic country that loved the Lord and had its founding in Christian values to one of collectivist values. And they knew that they had to be able to put that in children's heads. And then through the First World War and Second World War, that's really when public school took off. Like, a lot of people don't know that the first 75 years of our country, there was no government school system. It was all private and all local. And so when our young men went off to war and our women went to factories, that was when these collectivists were able to implement their vision, because the kids had no other place to go. And it's just gone downhill from there.
Yeah. And people don't really understand. And I kind of like, like for you to explain, but that like the cost, I know a lot of people have heard of the cost per student is just astronomical when you relate it back to performance, like, English and math literacy and so on. It's just extraordinary the thousands of dollars that has been thrown at these kids. And then I think back to Little Red Schoolhouse that we talked about at the beginning of the show in Salinas, Kansas, which was just a little clapboard schoolhouse, right, with benches in it, for God's sake.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't spending thousands of dollars to educate these children. No. And I don't believe, and the reason I'm bringing this up, I don't believe that based on the resources now that your organization and some others have given the homeschoolers, I don't believe that that's the case either.
No. Yeah. So our average in America now is around like $18,000, and it's going up every year. So in a few years, it'll be $20,000 per kid in the U.S. So say 12 years, although some of them go even longer, right? That's $240,000, and only a third of them can read at grade level. Only like 18% are proficient in history. A third are, proficient in maths. Half of American adults can't read beyond a 6th grade level. And so we've spent, not only have we wasted 12 years of these people's lives, which is, of course, time is our most precious part, but they can't read, they can't do math, and they're depressed. Versus homeschooling, like for our program, it's about $1,000 for younger students to $2,000 for older students per year. And, we are getting kids, full ride scholarships into colleges. They're starting businesses and going right into being entrepreneurs. So it doesn't cost a lot of money. And the biggest thing is teaching kids how to read, which is why they took phonics out of the school system and put in this whole world methodology, because they wanted an illiterate lower class that would work for pennies while just voting for collectivist means. And that was their game plan, and they've executed it well.
Yeah, I would say so. Now, I know a lot of people are going to push back and say, because quite frankly, they use the school system as babysitters because both parents work.
Sure.
And, part of that, that's a societal problem that has been implemented to do just that, to turn the schools into a babysitter so that they could indoctrinate the children without the parents being around. And so does your organization help with people understand, say, for example, a cul-de-sac could have, 5 or 6 different families and rotate through them to where that does not become an imposition and they can still homeschool their children, right? They're not caught up in, well, both parents work, so how are we going to do this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we help people in all sorts of circumstances. Kind of how we differentiate ourselves is we form communities that meet once a week with a trained parent tutor. So you're not homeschooling alone. We've got a full K through 12 curriculum, even college classes now. And, you're coming together, typically like 50 or 60 kids in a community. They divide up into rooms of, 8 to 12 kids. And they're going over that curriculum together. And so we have people who have both parents working. We have single moms in our programs. We've got, rich doctors, and we've got blue collar plumbers, in our programs. Right. And they share, a desire for their kids to learn, to think well. And that's really what we're trying to do at Classical Conversations. Right. And so it's not homeschooling. Is not for the rich. It's not just for the middle class. There's people of all demographics figuring it out, and grandparents helping.
Yeah, but what it's really about is educating the children. I mean, really educating the children, not just some kind of BS support the teachers union kind of crap, or paying an administrator $150,000 a year to sit on his thumbs. It's really educating the kids to where they have marketable skills and have learned them. plus, I believe, is probably an attribute that doesn't get talked about much, is the parents, and you mentioned it earlier, is the parents actually get educating their children because they're coming across stuff that they didn't get in school, right?
Yeah, we hear that all the time, that they're redeeming their own education. And I always say that I work with the smartest moms in the world because they've been teaching, all six subjects for, 18 years of their lives. And so it's just, it's incredible, but you don't get there. I mean, if you start, especially with a young kid, you don't have to know algebra when you're teaching them, subtraction and addition and multiplication and division, that as you go along with them, you can pick it up. And there's so much help now for parents, it's our program or Khan Academy or, all sorts of different resources made for parents. And let's be clear that teachers, again, like people like my wife, she loved the kids, but they actually never taught her how to teach anything. They just taught her how to manage classrooms in a way that would, basically groom these kids into being collectivists without her knowledge. She didn't know that's what she was doing. She thought she was giving them an education.
Well, yeah. And I think now there's a little bit of light being shown, with the whole CRT crap and stuff that they've put into the books that kids are being associated or being shown and everything else. The level of quite frankly, level of evil that's come into that circle. But one of my curiosities though here, Robert, are the churches, since they're already empty basically Monday through Friday. So are the churches starting to step up with this to support the education, or does that violate some kind of silly ass IRS code?
Yeah, no, it doesn't violate any silly IRS codes, although sometimes the fire marshal likes to come and complain. But
sure.
I mean, churches are stepping up and helping either start schools or opening their doors to homeschool co-ops or homeschool groups, or starting like 2-day a week or 3-day a week university model schools. So I always just encourage people that, God says that he's going to give us resources to benefit his kingdom. If your church is sitting empty 5 days a week, what are you planning on telling God when you see him in front of the Bema seat? He's going to say, hey, I gave you this church to use 7 days a week, but you only used it Sundays and Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
That's not going to be a very fun conversation for those pastors or elders or, nonprofit board members.
So like with the deacons and stuff like that, Robert, is there a way that they can become involved with Classic Conversations and start doing this as part of, teaching the kids? Because I'm sure we all have certain gifts, right?
Yeah.
Some of us are good at math. Some of us are better at English, which I'm not. But I mean, history, I'm good at history. But I mean, everybody has a given, God-given skill set on stuff. And I was wondering if classics help with that, because, like, for example, my church, I mean, we have a plethora of deacons that could hold classes,
Right. Yeah, so we have a lot of pastors that lead different groups inside Classical Conversations, and we have a few thousand churches that host Classical Conversations groups here in the United States and around the world. And so, yeah, if you go to classicalconversations.com and put in your zip code, we'd love to help you get started. And, you can start things like simply just have an education fund at your church that helps kids get out of the public school system.
Yeah.
You can do a fundraiser for a local Christian school if you don't have the space or means to actually build one yourself, or just open it up to homeschool classes and co-ops during the week, because I mean, you can get 10 or 12 kids in there and, they're learning history. They're learning about God. They see the church as the center of society and culture, because that's where they're meeting at for education, which is, what made our country great for the first 100
Wow.
years, was because the church was the center of culture, and the church abandoned that and gave it to Hollywood, gave it to the media, and instead of keeping it for themselves.
So, what are your thoughts on Trump trying to get rid of the Department of Education? I know he's trying, and I know that the level of bureaucracy that McMahon has to wade through before she can get this done is enormous. I was just curious your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Trump trying to get rid of the Department of Education is a step in the right direction, but it's not the biggest step, because the problem is the federal government still has laws that Congress has created. And so they're moving the implementation of those laws to different departments like the Department of Labor. But getting rid of the department while keeping the laws is just putting lipstick on a pig. And so I think Trump's doing what he can, but until Congress acts, there's no, congressional, there's no constitutional right for the government to be involved at all. So we need Congress.
Yeah. It never should have been. And, I can see it now. And it just occurred to me that if we start educating or start homeschooling kids in church, there's going to be some kind of a lawsuit about the separation of church and state, which doesn't even come into conversation in reality. So anyway, that's probably a conversation for another time.
The churches have a constitutional right. I mean, they've been trying to stop us in the past or stop other organizations, and the churches win. That's why there's great organizations like ADF and Liberty First Council. So churches don't need to be scared of government. They need to be scared of God, and they need to be willing to do the right thing no matter what.
Exactly. So I noticed in your book, you talk about the illusion of school choice, and I'd like you to go into that because, that's school choice is the phrase of the day, if you will. Yeah. And I loved the fact that you put in there that it's an illusion, and I'd like you to expand on that if you could.
Yeah, so, I mean, I wish school choice was the answer. I, of course, believe in educational opportunities for everyone. But when government starts paying for things, whether it's healthcare or really anything the government's gotten involved in, the prices go up and the quality goes down, and your options cease to exist. I mean, just remember Obamacare, basically single-payer healthcare, 60,000 doctors quit, so now trillions of dollars being spent on that. So it really is an illusion because it gives all the power to whoever finances it. Whoever pays the piper chooses the tune. And so what school choice is doing is just turning private schools into public schools, because now they have to obey whatever the government whims are. And so ultimately, we're turning over our autonomy over for a bowl of soup. I think about like Esau turning over his birthright, to Jacob for a bowl of soup because he was hungry. So ultimately, what we're seeing like in Texas is, now they've got Islamic schools opening up and taking this conservative taxpayers' money. So, radical Islam's being funded by school choice. The LGBT movement, they're just opening LGBT schools. And so it's really, it's not and for Christians, like, are we going to rely on God to take care of us, or are we going to rely on the government? And so there's been other countries like Sweden that have implemented this, and within 20 years, all choice has gone because the government is now controlling everybody because they're relying on the government to fund them. So if the government says jump, they say how high, and that's the case everywhere. And so we really dive into the books about the fruit of it, and then like what is the ideology behind it? Well, it turns every single child into a commodity. So it's dehumanizing, and it's causing people to look not to their father to provide for them, but for the state to provide for them.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The 10th plank of Communist Manifesto reads, free education for everyone, or free public education for everyone. What people don't realize is when Karl Marx wrote that, public meant open to the public, like Walmart is open to the public. So even today over in England, a public school is what we would call a private school here because it's open to the public for enrollment. It's not a school for, like the royalty or the elite. The average Joe could go there. And so we're implementing Karl Marx's vision. The Marxists have never built anything. That's what I loved about that little clip at the beginning of our conversation is, right, they're just leeches. They're just parasites.
Yep.
And so, of course, Karl Marx wasn't going to do the work to create a whole new education system. He just wanted to co-opt the one that was there. And so he was going to do that by, providing finances. And the United Nations, UNESCO, which one of the main school choice lobbyists, he's from UNESCO, they said they have a paper called the GEM Report where they basically lay out, hey, governments give money to the private schools so that you can control them. And so that's ultimately the end game, so that they can get their hands on all the kids instead of giving a way out. So, it sounds nice on paper, getting free money, but as we know, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Nope.
Eventually, are you going to really bite the hand that feeds you?
Yeah, and that's the whole premise around this anyway, right, Robert? Is the fact that you dumb down the populace to where they don't even realize what the end game is, right?
Absolutely.
It's the whole scenario of the cave, and the algorithm of the cave and everything else. So how do we fix it? How do we incrementally fix it? I mean, I know in my heart how to fix it, but how does the public? I think probably parents need to get off their butts and start participating in this. But additionally, what needs to be done besides people realizing that, they need to get off the milk stool and, and start becoming their own individuals again.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it starts with individual responsibility for our own families and ourselves. And, if you're in a situation where you simply can't do that, well, read to your kids every single night. Make sure you do a little bit of extra. My dad and my grandparents were immigrated here. They didn't know English. And so they worked on it together as a family every single night. And so it's going to take rugged individualism to lift ourselves out of this. Churches need to do more. They need to start education funds. They need to have preachers preaching from the pulpit that the public school is not safe for your kids. I mean, it is. I think the statistics show there's a 70% chance your kid's going to go to hell if they go to public school and are in church because they abandon the faith. Because as the atheists know, coloring a picture of Noah for an hour on Sundays is not going to overcome 7 hours a day, 5 days a week of indoctrination.
Indoctrination, exactly.
And then, churches can do their thing. And then business owners, like if you want an educated workforce in the future, well, you better start investing in local private schools or starting, homeschool groups or, just supporting educators who are doing the hard work in your area. So, it's going to take all of us making sacrifices. But if we keep letting the collectivists pay for education, we're going to keep getting collectivists out of it.
That's an interesting point because a lot of these companies offer on-site childcare, right? Yeah. Why not them not only offer on-site childcare but on-site education as well, right? Where as part of the benefit, as part of the company benefit, the people can bring their kids. Obviously, if they both parents are working, they have an opportunity to bring their kids to an environment where they're homeschooled at work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you could hire a teacher, probably pay him $50,000, $60,000 a year and give them 10, 12 kids. Your parents would be much happier. And
not only that, you probably have employees that have skill sets in all of these different areas that could rotate through as part of the being part of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole new solution set right there.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the thing early on in America, right? The kids would go work with their parents or their uncles, or
that was the essence of apprenticeships, right?
Yep. Yeah, which are practically outlawed by the government nowadays. Yeah. So it's
interesting.
We've shot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah. So social media, give everybody the social media contact points so that they can get a hold of you in classical conversations and start learning more about this, because it's really, really important.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, you can follow me, The Robert B. Show, on X. I'm very popular there. And I got a Substack too. And then classicalconversations.com is our website, but we're on all the socials. Just search Classical Conversations. And we'd love to get you started homeschooling today, or if you're interested in starting a co-op or a group in your area, we'd love to help you get started. So we're just people helping other people try to give their kids a great education, and God's blessed it, and our kids are flourishing as adults. So get on board before it's too late.
Where can people find the book, Robert? Yeah,
so Woke and Weaponized is on Amazon.com right now. 2-day shipping prime, so it can be there by the weekend. And it's go to search Woke and Weaponized there. So we've already sold almost 2,000 copies, so well on our way to being a bestseller. But we need it in every pastor's hands in America. I really believe
exactly. It. Well, listen, I'd like to thank you and everybody that's listening. And right now I'd like to share a verse from Proverbs 27. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Not everyone sharpens you, some drain you. That's why God removes the wrong ones and replaces them with the right ones. He knows what you can't see. He hears what you don't hear. He will connect you to the voices that lift you higher. Once again, Robert, it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. And I hope to have you back on really soon.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.